Continuing the conversation on the topic of defunding the police. What could that look like in communities across the tri-state? Our Larry Seward took that question right to the top with those who influence the purse strings for local patrols. Larry?
When you hear people say defund police, in reality, what does that look like?
I'll be the first to say, under no circumstance do you want to just get rid of your police agency. Some of the agencies buy all kinds of military equipment. Do we really need that, to address issues on our urban streets?
No justice! No peace!
3 weeks ago, a peaceful protest spiraled into looting and vandalism. Cincinnati police answered with batons, gas, and pepper sprays.
I believe there are people being detained.
We saw them corner and flex cuff curfew violators on live TV. For several days, lines of officers in riot gear faced off with non-violent crowds at protests. Hamilton County Sheriff deputies did too. They rolled in military vehicles. Eventually, Sheriff Jim Neal and Chief Elliot Isaac kneeled with protesters. And during the largest demonstration on Fountain Square, law enforcement mostly stayed out of sight.
Tell me how your strategy in dealing with the protesters has evolved since Friday.
I think we're out here to facilitate a peaceful protest, and as long as the protests stay peaceful, we won't bother, we won't interfere in any fashion.
You must support the police, because if you don't support the police, who are you going to call when you actually need some help?
Defunding the police, taking away from the police budget at this time in our society, like I said, the people that are talking about it don't really have any sense of reality or reasonableness.
90% of our police budget is personnel, and the non-personnel involves things like millions of dollars for body-worn cameras and technology like that.
Denise Trios is part of the commission overseeing the Hamilton County Sheriff's budget. She and State Senator Cecil Thomas, a former Cincinnati policeman, believe cries for police funding change involve better distributing resources. Nationwide, FBI stats show crime at a 2-decade low, but police cost more than a third of Cincinnati's city budget. The county's bill for deputies is similar.
What we are hearing on the street and from some of the leaders in this community is that we need to think about an appropriate response for that 911 call.
I think one of the changes we may want to look at is how we deal with the civil unrest in particular. Do we use a show of force to dispel some form of peaceful protest? And I would say absolutely not.
Cincinnati knows change. In 2002, a year after riots over police killings, the Cincinnati Collaborative Agreement attacked racism in policing and allowed some citizen oversight. Recent work to beef it up stalled when the city furloughed 3 CCA employees, including the person in charge.
We just gave them part of the demands.
Iris Rowley worked on the deal, sees problems, and she's hardly alone.
If this really was, deemed essential and imperative, a moral imperative for our city, you wouldn't furlough the person who is charged with leading and implementing and sort of guiding the refresh of the collaborative.
We can do policing differently and have a more appropriate response to those calls, because we're already doing it for folks that suffer mental health or addiction issues. And so there's a way to do this.
Well, despite budget woes, both Cincinnati and Hamilton County will be hiring. The Justice Department gave each community police grants recently to add bodies. Cincinnati, it's getting more than $10 million for 86 new officers. Hamilton County, they'll be able to pay for 10 new deputies. Tamika.